All right. The warning I got was this is going to be one of the more boring sessions because it's been hard to get interesting takes out of Shaun.
No opinions.
Exactly. We'll do our best. But to get started, I think that we entitled this, like, is this the golden era? And I think we're just about past 5 weeks of the Trump administration, which means by my calculations, he's had to do about 25 things now, 5 per week. And so are we in the golden era? How's it going? What's your assessment?
I've got to start with a few preambles. One, all opinions are my own, definitely not my employer's, which is an amazing place. Very grateful to be there. Second, fun fact about Michael, he was editorial chair of the Harvard Crimson back when it meant something. And so I'm intimidated to be sitting next to this guy. He's semi-journalist. Golden era, I think it depends who you ask. If you ask me, I think we have a shot at it now. And look, I love America deeply. I come from a very patriotic family. Both of my grandfathers were in the military. One of my grandfathers, him and all three of his brothers fought in World War II. One of my dad's brother and a brother-in-law were in the military. One was a career naval officer. Like, I really grew up around hardcore pro-America philosophy. And in my opinion, America was going in the wrong direction in many domains. And I mean, one domain was like our economy, and not the headline, not the market cap of stocks, which I think is pretty easy to manipulate in the short run through printing money or low interest rates. But in the longer run, I think we were really running off a fiscal cliff. And a lot of people have articulated this better than I can. But I think this was existential for America in the longer run. We also had been in a 30-year outsourcing phase of outsourcing our manufacturing, specifically to China, but all over the world, which I think runs huge strategic risks in the future. This is one where I think many people would disagree with me, but I personally feel like the regulatory capture and lawfare had gotten pretty extreme. And when these things happen, I think it's a tax on the entire system, and it's hard to be, it's hard to attract the best talent. It's hard to incentivize people to go take big risks starting companies. It's hard to keep your currency as the dominant reserve currency. People are less afraid of you militarily when you don't make anything at home. And I think at least in all the things I just mentioned, I really believe that the Trump administration is the best equipped administration in our lifetimes to actually start tackling these problems. And for each of them, like on the fiscal situation, everyone's shitting on Doge. I get it. But I'm very optimistic about Doge. Like, I really believe they're going to have a much bigger impact than people realize. And they'll make mistakes. It's it's hard to do things perfectly when you're moving really quickly. But I think the other side is the level of transparency we're seeing. Like, to have a website that roughly 2 weeks after any action, they're putting contracts out there and the actual specific actions they're taking and tweeting basically every day about what's happening. For me, I'm very optimistic about Doge, and I love that transparency, even if some people disagree with what they're doing, and even if there's second order effects that are short-term negative. On the insourcing manufacturing, I mean, this is something that JD Vance has been it's been a core platform of his. I think we're at the very beginning of seeing some very big programs there. I'm actually very optimistic about supply chain slowly coming back to America. It's not something you can do quickly. And on the lawfare, regulatory capture, it's a much harder problem to solve. But I think this administration at least knows, is aware of the problem and is going to try to solve it. I think the last thing, again, many people disagree with me, but I think we got to a point with freedom of speech where it was under threat. And if you look at some of the actions that were taken, again, whether you like the people that are speaking, I'll give an example. Mikey and I are both Jewish. We're proud Jews. Kanye West recently had just unbelievably horrific content. It was very upsetting as a Jew. But I also, I believe in freedom of speech, and I don't think the right tactic is to just ban him from every platform in that situation. I think that when you do that, it basically always has worse effects in the long run. And so this is another thing where I really feel like freedom of speech itself was under attack. And I think as we kind of line all these things up, we have a real shot of bringing the golden era back.
Okay. I like it. Okay, but what 5 things did you do last week? No.
I could send that email in 30 seconds.
Well, you mentioned Doge, and it's interesting because it feels like, if you have a muscle memory of what happened at X, which you and Sequoia has made a significant investment in X. I think we felt a lot of the same turmoil as Elon brought the sync in, and people were getting fired, and there were people on the streets who were real or not real. You couldn't tell who was
Ligma Johnson,
exactly, Ligma Johnson, and all that going on, and so it feels like maybe we're there. And I read a recent report. X's profitability is up significantly. Obviously, we've all seen the Grok news, and X has a significant stake in XAI, and reports that they're raising a round, and potentially on relatively favorable terms relative to what I think people would have expected over the last year or so. How did that? What's your assessment? Like, how's that turnaround gone? Is it, and what can we expect there?
Sequoia, we were big investors in the take private. From the very beginning, we knew it was going to be a rocky takeoff, but we believe in Elon, and Sequoia has a long history with Elon. Obviously, backed PayPal. We're major investors in SpaceX, and to be honest, it's kind of gone how I thought it would, which was it was very chaotic because we did something really hard. But never bet against Elon. And I think when you look back on what was said when the take private was happening, people were saying that the platform was going to die, servers were going to, go offline, everything was going to be doom and gloom. All the reports are, kind of repeatedly been all-time high user metrics. Obviously, advertisement went way down. The reports are that advertisers are coming back. In my opinion, when you build a great platform, when you become like a town square, eventually you'll monetize that. And I think we're in the very beginning of seeing this. I think the first 2 years were just stabilizing the ship, kind of getting a new team in place, getting the infrastructure solid, and running experiments. And now I think you have to look at the first derivative and second derivative of everything. And the derivatives are incredibly positive on every front, and XAI is one of those, where if you look at the Grok launch, you can debate where it is in state-of-the-art leaderboards, but and Sarah is an expert in this, but I think catching up to close to state-of-the-art when you're starting years behind everyone else is insanely impressive, and I think people just should remember the skepticism around Tesla in 2017, 2018, the skepticism around SpaceX even 5-6 years ago, the skepticism that X would fail, skepticism with XAI at a high valuation when they came out of the gates. I think X will really surprise people, to be honest.
And speaking of X, Shaun, I would say, beyond being a very close friend, you're also one of my favorite follows. If you don't follow Shaun, you should. It's extremely entertaining and informative. But I think, everyone would love to have an audience on X. So give us some tips, Shaun. How do we grow on X?
There's a woman, Lulu Meng. I've never met her in person. I only know her on Twitter.
Lulu Maservi.
Yes, Maservi.
Yes, yeah.
So Lulu, I apologize for butchering your name.
She actually did a takedown on PR of FabFitFun once, but
in a bad way.
We made a big mistake, but
well, you probably did because she's really.
But then we became friends because of it, so it was God's way.
So she had a pretty brilliant articulation of something that kind of was my philosophy instinctively, but I had never really figured out what I was doing. And her view was basically, you can't build a following on social media if you don't take strong positions. It's kind of impossible. You don't get attention that way. But it's your choice of how you slice the world. So basically, to get attention, you have to slice the world in some way. But it's your choice of how you slice the world. And you should slice the world in a way that aligns with what is true to you from an integrity perspective, but also like what you think is good for you from a business, career, all that perspective. And so, for example, if you are a tech person, you can align with tech accelerationism. And you make fun of the decelerationist, you make fun of people passing new laws, like you have to go take strong opinions on the other side. But if you're in tech, if you're a VC, you're a founder, and it depends, not if you're consumer founders there, you don't want to alienate, everyone, but like as a VC, it's pretty easy to take an accelerationist view of technology. You can slice the world Republican versus Democrat, and that will get a lot of attention. You'll get amplification. If you take the Republican perspective, you'll get amplification from Republicans. You'll actually also get amplification from the Democratic side of them not liking you and basically saying how stupid you are. But you really have to slice the world somehow. And I think the thing is you have to find what aligns with your integrity and kind of your business goals. So for me, I've had, I think, 3 phases on my Twitter. For roughly 10 years, it was just techno-optimism. I did a PhD. It was, this is cool science stuff happening. I would write blog posts about physics or other areas of science, math, Bitcoin. And that was kind of my initial decade, 20,000 followers or something like that, 10,000 followers. And then after October 7th, I basically said, just from an integrity perspective, I have to speak up. I'm going to be loud. And I took a very pro-Israel stance. And then after that happened, and I was used to getting death threats, used to having people hate me, used to people trying to get me fired. I was like, well, this is the other topic I care about, which is trying to bring America into the golden era. And, for people that don't know, I went from being a pretty big Hillary Clinton supporter in 2016 to a pretty big Trump supporter this time around. And that was quite the journey and evolution, but I felt like it was really important to share kind of some of the lessons learned for me along the way and how I changed my mind. And so I took a strong position on that.
And talk about that for a second, just like, so taking strong positions, like being outspoken, I think it's almost part of your reputation at this point, I think, given Israel, I think one of the Trump endorsements that so many people sent to me was your endorsement. I'm like, I've been talking about it, with him. I get it, but like, how do you do the cost benefit of taking a big visible public stand on that, and beyond cost benefit, like what's the good, bad, the ugly? Like, I mean, there's a personal toll. How do you think about it?
I think a lot of people that don't know me and they only know me online, they're probably going to think I'm lying when I say this, but my entire life, I have always tried to stand up for what I think is right. And so I probably index even further than most of just like speaking up when I think something is an unpopular truth. And one of the first in more recent times where I did that online was actually when Ryan Breslow went after the Collison brothers, called them the mafia and all of that. And I don't wish any ill will to anyone, but I know John and Patrick and they're incredibly high integrity people, and I also know Ryan, and I think what he was saying was just a complete lie to get attention. And I spoke up there. I actually got a lot of hate for that, surprisingly. It was on the All In pod, which I love those guys. They're incredible. But Jason had this whole thing around VC should never speak ill of founders, which I understand that perspective, but I knew all sides, and I felt like...
Well, that was founder on founder warfare there, so... Founder
on founder is okay. VC on founder is not supposed to be okay, but occasionally, if you think there's wrong being done. So look, I think there's just a nuanced thing. It depends where you are, and you have to toggle what feels right to you. Like, are you willing to get fired for speaking your mind? And the Ryan Breslow thing wasn't that, and I'm not saying this was a risk at Sequoia. Sequoia is an incredible place, but whenever you take a controversial perspective on a hot button topic, there's a risk that there's all sorts of negative ramifications. You have to be ready for that. It's like one bit of advice I give younger people, like a lot of young Jews have asked me, should I come out publicly supporting Israel? And to be honest with most young Jews, I don't think it's the right time for them.
Wow.
I think that if you do it, it will probably limit your career if you're doing it at a young age. Also, not many people will listen to you if you don't have a following or haven't done much. So it's not that much benefit. And I think the optimal strategy is kind of get to a point, and there's a lot of strategies, it depends on the person, but you kind of have to get to a point where you have enough of an audience that people will actually listen. Also, where you know enough to where you have something interesting to say. Like, it's not worth jumping in on a controversial topic if you don't have anything additive to say. And then you have to be willing to live with the consequences if something goes wrong.
And so Israel, and thinking of being outspoken, some of the cost benefit, one thing I've learned about, some of your investing activities, you've made a bunch of bets now in Israel. And maybe that's, derivative of being outspoken or maybe not, but, tell us a little bit about that and what you've seen in that ecosystem, from the outside, maybe how do you even make investments at a time when all this craziness is happening? What does that landscape look like? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Sequoia has a very long history in Israel. Obviously, it started something called Sequoia Israel. My partner, Jim Getz, incubated Palo Alto Networks, which is an incredible story with an Israeli founder, Nir Zook. And anyways, we had made Sequoia's seed investor in Mellanox, which was acquired by NVIDIA for, I think, $8 billion around there. And Mellanox is really one of the core reasons why NVIDIA is winning the AI race these days. But we have a long history. My partner's done a huge amount of work. But when I joined Sequoia, Doug had incredible relationships in Israel, and we backed Gili Renan's fund, CyberStarts, which has been fantastic. Gili's an incredibly talented former Sequoia Israel partner. But one of the things that I came with was a belief that we were at the right point in the Israeli ecosystem to start making a lot of investments, that it just takes time for an ecosystem to mature. When founders grew up without much means and you have the opportunity to sell your first company for a few $100 million, like, it's hard to say no to. I've been there myself. I sold a company I founded probably too early. And it's really hard to say no when you get big numbers in front of you and you haven't made any money. And so I felt like the Israeli, and my partners agreed, but we had gotten to a point in the Israeli ecosystem where people were going to be coming for their second companies. And a lot of our best investments in the last 5 years have been second-time founders in Israel. And we had these relationships. And so we've made really great investments. Doug led the Wiz first round with Gili, and then a bunch of others, Island, Sierra, et cetera. But after October 7th, we had a view as a firm, like, the best time to lean into, as an investor, you want to buy low, sell high. And Israel was low after October 7th. And it made sense to, when other investors were afraid to be there, to spend more time. And so a few of us spent time on the ground and meant a lot to the founders. And I think we're going to do extremely well with our investments there.
Awesome. One thing I love about you, Shaun, is like how you weave your just personal interest with your investing, and probably the category I associate most with you is actually, the first time I met you, I think you were still like doing your Caltech PhD, and you were talking about like cosmic waves, and I was like, what? I don't even know what that means, but it's interesting. And so I think space is a thesis for you, investment area for you. I think everyone knows about SpaceX. That's they land rockets, they have Starlink, I think, but there's a lot more happening, and maybe talk a little bit about space because few people talk about it, in the way at depth of knowledge that you do. So awesome to hear your take on it.
You're a good friend. Give me the layups. I've been obsessed with space since I was a little kid. Literally obsessed. Like, I couldn't sleep at night for years as a kid because I would just think about space. Which obviously led to doing a PhD and thinking about what happens inside black holes. Not very monetizable, but a lot of fun. And I started a failed space launch company with with two friends in 2009. Learned a lot through failure. But look, I really believe that thanks to SpaceX, we're at the very beginning of a completely new era in space that I think most people really can't fathom what's going to come over the next 10 and 20 years. If you want to understand more deeply, I have a friend named Casey Handmer, who's a friend from grad school, who I think is one of the most brilliant minds and writers in terms of writing about what Starship is going to do for the future.
Where does he write? On X or?
He writes a blog. If you Google Casey Handmer, you will find his stuff. And anyone that follows space probably knows who he is. But in AI right now, people have refound Jevons paradox, which is an idea from economics, which is basically if you drop the cost of something, then demand will go up by a much bigger amount. Like if you drop the cost of AI inference by a factor of 10, like demand will go up by a factor of, call it 100. If you just look at the curves of what's happening to the cost of launch, it's crazy. And with Starship, we're going to drop another couple orders of magnitude. And I don't think anyone can tell you exactly how that's going to play out. But I think Starlink is one of the best businesses of all time, like genuinely one of the best businesses of all time. If you compare the public Starlink revenue numbers or estimates to the revenue growth of, say, AWS, Starlink has grown way faster than AWS and like way more profitably. It's just this insane business. And I don't think Starlink will be the last great space infrastructure business. Like if I were to guess, I think that in 20 years, there'll probably be like 5 Starlink level businesses. It's hard to say exactly what they'll be. I have some ideas. I'm not sharing all the alpha.
Let's talk about it backstage.
And I also, we can talk about it backstage. Elon is obviously very committed to Mars. And if I'm being honest, 5 years ago when we first did major investment in SpaceX, as someone that loves space, I was thrilled to pioneer Mars and as an important thing for humanity, was thrilled by that. But as an investor in the company, I didn't fully understand the value of it. And I'm now at a point where I really believe that through the process of building a fully self-sustaining city on Mars, which is SpaceX's goal, with an estimate of, call it 25 years from now, having about 1 million people on Mars, I think that in that process, all of the second and third order businesses that are going to get created is going to be incredible. For example, like SpaceX is going to have to figure out or some other company is going to have to figure out vertical farming, going to have to figure out energy. I think that a lot of that will be solar, but some of it might be nuclear. I think that we'll have to improve surgical robots, going to have to improve communications technology, just on and on and on. I think something that people talk about with NASA in the 60s and 70s is there were a lot of spin-out technologies that benefited the public sector that came from when you're focused on this really, really constrained hard problem, which is some space application. It forces you to come up with very innovative solutions, and then those have consumer applications. And I think as we enter this era where we're actually trying to build a city on Mars, the spin-out technologies are going to be incredible.
You just gave me a great idea for my 65th birthday.
Oh, we're going to Mars.
25 years from now on Mars.
That might be a year-round trip, but I'm in if you want.
We're just about out of time, but I have to end on this note. You're one of the most with all your public takes and this persona, also privately one of the most optimistic people I know. And so maybe just share with the the group here, the audience here, just what is your optimism for? What's that about? Like what are you so excited about the future?
Look, if you look at the history of humanity, there's been a lot of catastrophic moments. There's been meteors that hit the Earth. There's been the Holocaust. Like there's extreme challenges, but we've always, as a species, made our way through. And you have Thomas Malthus forecasted that humans wouldn't be able to sustain enough humans with birth rate and where food supply was, but technology improved, as the problem got more acute and capitalism kicked in, and we now have, 9 billion people or something around there. And it's just, I really believe that whatever problem comes up, as the problem becomes more and more acute, market forces will kick in and we will solve it, even if the problems are really bad.
Awesome. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you all.
Sure.
Nice to